Hello there. This is the Marbles D2 micarta trapper. This has a D2 steel or two D2 steel blades. Now I'd never sharpened D2 before, so I went online and started looking at information about D2. And the consensus in most of the knife making community or the knife sharpening community is that this steel contains large carbide particles and vanadium particles. And stones like this India stone, aluminum oxide, or the crystalline silicon carbide supposedly cannot be used with this stone or this steel because they will pull carbides or vanadium particles out of the edge because the vanadium is harder than the rest of the steel, and instead of cutting it, it pulls those chunks out of the edge. That's, to the best of my ability, what I keep reading. And so they tell you that you have to use diamond stones with these blades. Well, some of my other research suggests and tells me that this is not a new steel. I don't know anything about it, so I assumed it was a newer type of steel, but it's not. This steel was used, this tool steel, D2 is a tool steel, was used in World War II. Okay, so this is not a new steel, it's an older steel. And people can correct me if they want to, but I don't think there were very many diamond plates available to consumers or the military guys that carried knives with this steel in it in the 40s. So I think they used stones like this. Now I can tell you what I think is causing the carbide tear out with these stones, with this knife and these stones. But if I told you that, people would get all hurt and upset, and before you know it, there'd be this big huge controversy. But I believe that it's the sharpening technique that causes this problem with this steel. There's the technique that I use, the burr method, is a very old technique that was around in World War II. And it's a foolproof technique if you do it right. But it's old, and people like more modern approaches now, and there's a couple of different modern approaches to sharpening these days that are far more aggressive than what I'm doing. And I think the steel is responding to the aggressiveness of some of the modern techniques. Now you can, like I said, you can take that or leave that. We're going to find out, because I have a loop. I'm going to look at this edge. This is the factory edge under this loop, and I'm going to begin sharpening on this India stone. And I'm going to keep a close eye on that edge. Matter of fact, this might be a two-parter video because of it. But if I see tear out of any kind, then I'll move to a diamond stone and admit that I was wrong, and I'll tell you right flat out on this video. But otherwise, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to start with an India stone and see what it does, because I believe this stone will cut this steel. I believe it will cut it well. I believe it's all in the technique, but I could be wrong, and I'm fully prepared to admit that. I want to see what whether I'm hitting that angle. And I am, but Marbles didn't do a bang-up job on the evenness of this bevel. Let's just put it that way. It's a wavy, lumpy kind of mess, and I'm gonna have to clean this up. And now that might also be a two-part video because this steel is harder. And it might just take longer to sharpen it. Actually, it's already starting to develop a burr, but it's very light, very small, and only on one small section of the blade. So let me see what the edge is looking like. Do I detect any tear out? Perfectly clean, smooth bevel. No tear out that I can detect so far, but I'm not hitting here, so I've got to kind of adjust my stroke a bit. The angle is not quite, the angle is a bit too steep, so I need to actually, I wouldn't say that. What's happening? Remember I said the bevel is wonky? Well, you can't see it on video, but from here to the tip is much wider than from here to here. And that's from the factory. That's not what I'm doing. But now I have to, I can either go with that, and I will, or what I could do is flatten it out some more and widen the bevel here. But we're not going to do that. I could do like a correction on it. So my angle is changing. I've tilted back, so I'm going to have to bring this bevel all the way to the edge again. But there's a little bit of a burr right there, but it only goes to there, and it doesn't go back here. So that's the unevenness of that bevel that we talked about earlier. And that's because some idiot put it on a belt sander. They always do to sharpen. And instead of coming like this, they did one of these numbers with the blade, and so the bevel is wavy. That's why I hate a belt sander edge, because guys think because they put that on a belt sander, and maybe they've got a little plate that they can lay this on to guide it, that they're going to get a perfect angle, but they always end up doing something like that and screwing it all up. And so I hate the fact that factory knives and even handmade knives, custom knives, they use a belt sander. Now, if you're grinding in a bevel on a new knife, one that never had a bevel on it before, you're making the knife, then yeah, you're going to use a belt sander because it's fast and quick and can be fairly precise. But you should follow that up with something else. Yeah. That's looking good. And the only kind of jaggedness that I see in this edge is where the bevel has quite not made it to the edge, to the apex yet. And that's from the belt sander, not this stone. So far, but we're early into this right now. So. Lovely. The bevel, the burr is getting better. I want to look at that burr now. I know I'm looking at the knife a lot. Sorry, but there's a reason for it. I've never used this steel before, never cut this steel before, and so I need to look at it often, see what it is that it's doing. Everybody gets so impatient now. They can't take their time and just enjoy whatever journey it is that they're on. They gotta reach the destination as quick as they can. They can't just enjoy the ride. And there's a lot I could say about that, but I'll hold off. And that burr is almost halfway up the knife now, and the edge is perfectly smooth. There's nothing tearing out of anything. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop. And I'm going to continue to sharpen this blade until I get a burr all along this edge, or until I start seeing tear out. If I start seeing tear out, I'll come back earlier. If not, I'm going to take this all the way to the tip with the burr. And then I'll be back to flip it over to the other side.